So my name is Keith Norbie, for those that don't know me. I help our worldwide partner community with solutions and sales acceleration. And this is an exciting announcement that we're here to make with a variety of people that, and I've got no slides, so save your applause for that. For me, this whole thing started a couple decades ago, personally, getting into the VMware space and the birth of VMworld. And for a lot of us, we looked at this as opportunities to really look for something different that remove barriers, created new opportunities. And so we're going to talk at depth about that today. We brought a couple technical resources to get into the depths of both the technology, customer implication. And I thought there's no better way to do that than to bring a partner of ours. And so we got Mark from Presidio. I see some other partners in town or in the room from ahead. And we have other partners worldwide, whether it be Accenture, Insight, CW, the list goes on and on. These are the folks that really, I think, bring the diverge set of skills needed to bring this together, not just deep storage, but as you know, there's security, networking, and a bunch of complexity around the operations to be able to get on-prem workloads to cloud. And that's really the focus of the topic. So without a ton of extra ado, I'll turn it over to Jason, who will give you a bit of the context behind what's changed in our relationship with VMware to kind of present this opportunity, and then hear from the two technical presenters as we can get into the depths of what you guys want to probably sink into. But it's good to see all you. And with that, here's Jason.
I manage the relationship between NetApp and VMware, and we've been really busy. Keith mentioned this partnership goes back 20 years, but over the last 2 years, we've been really busy together. The first thing I want to call your attention to is this morning, a joint announcement went out between the two companies. We were all asleep here in California. Went out this morning at 5 between the two CEOs. That's going to talk a little bit about what's coming out next in a specific press release with AWS. But we've also been working with Tanzu, VMware Cloud Foundation, vVols, NVMe. There are several other joint technology initiatives that we've been hard at work at for the last 18 months that are in that announcement. Please go take a look at that. We're happy to take any more questions on that. But today we really wanted to drill down into the hybrid multi-cloud supplemental data store work, as Keith mentioned. But definitely take a look at this release if you get a chance, and we'd love your feedback. Now, what NiMo's going to talk to and Mark's going to get into a lot of detail on is this whole project was really born from a very simple premise that came directly from our customers. This is all about customers that had decided to move their VMware workloads from on-premise into the cloud and stay on VMware. So they decided not to stay on-prem. They decided not to go to cloud native yet. They may still do so in the future, but they wanted to stay on that VMware control platform. And today, as you guys are well aware of, across all three hyperscalers, today, all of the VMware Cloud services are built with vSAN and a hyperconverged infrastructure within it. So when you go provision the compute nodes and buy the compute nodes, you are going to be building that on a hyperconverged stack. Now, one of the things that VMware brought to our attention, and this was coming directly from customers, we were hearing it too, was they wanted more flexibility in being able to scale just storage independent of cloud compute. Today, they have to buy it as a bundle, and depending on the hyperscaler, there are certain configurations available. We'll take AWS as an example. There's two choices today. So you can pick your node type. It comes with a certain amount of CPU, a certain amount of capacity, and price. Now, VMware has these two options available, and for a lot of workloads, that will work nicely if your compute and storage are well balanced. But what VMware started seeing was workloads where the storage requirement is heavier than the compute requirement posed a challenge to customers, quite frankly, on cost. They could see right away that they were buying more compute than they needed just to get the capacity they needed. So this is where this whole idea of a supplemental data store program was really born. So VMware came to us and said, hey, we'd like to be able to find a way to supplement the cloud storage that we have at VMC at AWS with external storage. Now, to do that, there were a couple of things that they required to have in place. There's lots of storage in the cloud. You couldn't just connect anything to the VMware Cloud service. The first thing that they wanted to make sure was we had a first-party managed native service at AWS. We actually went down the route of exploring this with some of our own customer-managed options like Cloud Volumes, ONTAP, and things of that nature. What we found is to make sure the performance, the availability, the security, service levels of VMC to be preserved, you needed to attach something that was a first-party managed service. And FSx for ONTAP had just come out at about that time last summer. So it was a perfect answer to this solution. The second requirement was they wanted something that was proven and mature. They didn't want to just attach anything to VMC. We've been working with VMware, as Keith mentioned, for over 20 years on premise with ONTAP. And FSx for ONTAP is basically taking the same core storage platform and enabling it in the hyperscaler. So they had a high level of comfort, knowledge, and understanding around ONTAP already. And then the third thing was it had to actually fix the problem, which was, if I have a storage-heavy workload, can this drive down and reduce the cost of the infrastructure environment and correct that storage-heavy problem? So when you get into like compression, dedupe, thin provisioning, all the things that we do in ONTAP, we actually found it addressed the challenge from a customer perspective. Now, we started this out in a private preview, and we just wanted to see how it went. We brought customers in. What did they think about it? Does it work? Is it the right solution for them? That went very well, so we moved it into a public initial access, and then let customers come in and start doing POCs and things of that nature in the summer. That went very well. And so what's coming right now, and is what we're briefing you on today, is we're actually going to go GA. We're going to bring this out formally. And this is really just the beginning. It's a big milestone for us, but we're going to have a roadmap that's going to continue to evolve. And we're really, really excited about this. So I wanted to just set a little context for you. And again, we're doing this at all three hyperscalers today. Microsoft and Google are doing a similar thing. Now, over at Microsoft and Google, it's their services, so they're actually doing the integration. At AWS, we're working with VMware because VMware actually drives the VMC service themselves. So I'm going to bring up NiMo. He's going to talk a little bit more about the architecture, get into the details with you, show you a demo, and then Mark's been one of the great partners out in the front lines actually talking to customers about this, and he's going to share some examples that they've seen.
As Jason mentioned, we have been working with VMware as well as with AWS in building this solution, right? The slide talks about the detailed architecture. I'm sure you have many questions when we talk about, hey, we have integrated, right? The first thing that comes up in mind is, how does it work? It's all about NFS. Everyone knows there can only be one single stream connection from NFS data store into the SXI host. How does it work? So as you see on the screen, you have VMware SDDC. As you know, when you deploy an SDDC, it goes into an AWS specific VPC, right? So it stays there. And you have got FSx ONTAP that is running in another VPC that is connected via a transit gateway. Now, the question is, why are we using transit gateway? The simple reason for that is FSx ONTAP today uses floating IP. A floating IP is a mechanism so that it can actually fail over between the zones if there is any kind of outage. And the floating IP doesn't reside within a CIDR of the VPC. It's a completely separate IP address that is being associated with it. So to make sure the failover happens during a zonal outage, we get a specific IP address. It can be any CIDR that you have in your environment which doesn't overlap with any of the other existing CIDRs. And with the on-premises side, it just works fine, right? So once you have that, you can actually connect. And in the initial release, which is going to be announced tomorrow, it will only be multi-AZ that is supported with FSx ONTAP for VMC, right? In the future, we are working towards that. Very soon, you will hear single AZ will also be supported. But for the this particular conversation, we are going to keep it at the multi-AZ level, right? Now, as you can see, it's only NFS v3. There is no iSCSI support at the moment. We only start with NFS v3. And that would enable customers who are running today with ONTAP in on-premises leverage SnapMirror capability. Now, it's not confined just for NetApp customers. For other customers who use other storage solutions, and if they want to move into AWS VMC, they can use FSx ONTAP as the data store for any storage-intensive workloads that they have, even for performance as well. So they can scale their VMC clusters accordingly just for their host requirements, not for the storage requirements.
Can the storage itself be scaled after it's provisioned?
Yes.
Okay.
So the question was, can we scale the storage after being provisioned? Yes. You can scale the storage. You can downsize the storage however you want to do it. You can increase the throughput as well as the as well as the IOPS, as you want it, and then bring it down as well. Cool. So it's purely pay as you grow. Yes.
Is any of this automated? And by that I mean the growth and the shrinking of the storage, but also knowing if it's the storage that needs to be adjusted, if this is even needed?
So it's more of a sizing question. So the question is this automated, so that understand can we actually shrink and grow as we need? So that's more of a customer-specific requirement. But it's all available via APIs as well as a single click of a button, which you can do. However, it depends on how you're actually monitoring the solution to see whether I really need this much storage or not. Then you can just execute that particular command to actually shrink it back.
So that command comes with the solution, or that comes with an external?
It's part of the PaaS offering. AWS FSx ONTAP is a PaaS offering, so it has all of those APIs, including REST, available out there. Right? In GA, we support 4 data stores to start with, right? And it will actually, as and when we move forward, the number of data stores will actually increase. However, keep in mind, with a single vSAN data store, the customers will get the ability to actually run multiple data stores the way they have been doing it in on-premises. So they can slice and dice their deployment and then actually make sure their databases are actually getting specific data stores the way they have been doing it in on-premises, right? And they can isolate the traffic that way. Again, one question that you might have in mind is this going over the NSX plane? No, it is not going over the NSX plane. As you can see in the graphics itself, from the VPC, it goes into the tier 0. As you guys know, by default, there is a tier 0 gateway and there is a tier 1 gateway. And from tier 0, it actually goes into the ESXi host directly. So it's not going over the management gateway at all. So you don't have to set any firewall rules or anything like that. It's all pre-created, done. And VMC has actually done more work in here in actually automating this part. And I'll actually walk you guys through how exactly it works. But,
So
yes.
when you show that slide to a security guy, he's going to say, wow, I wanted to go over firewall. How do you make the argument that he shouldn't care?
So the way it works is it's all happening within the AWS VPCs itself. So when the traffic actually goes on in flight, it actually is encrypted all the way on the FSx side. When it actually hits to the transit gateway, that is when the SSL termination happens. And from there, it is actually internal because it's already on the tier 0 by then.
So from the AWS compartment into the customer
Until this
compartment,
year, it's
how is key management handled so that security is satisfied that we're using the keys that they can control between where it's stored on disk to where it gets to their customer?
So with FSx ONTAP, you can have the key manage yourselves, or customer can go with Amazon managed keys as well. So what we have also done is we have built a Tco Estimator that will help customers in identifying how much of storage is required, how many nodes would be required, and what it takes to just run it on vSAN alone, and how much does it take to actually go and then use FSxN into the solution. So that way you will see how much of the benefit you get on a TCO standpoint. What I'm going to do here is, rather than going through the slides and talking through that, I thought it's better to do a live demo. So what you see on my screen now is the VMC SDDC. As you can see, I've got a single host in there. Obviously, we need to pay for it, so we try to keep it smaller from a footprint standpoint. And it's an i3 host. Now, what you can see here is, for those guys who haven't seen this, there is a storage option. So generally, there is no storage option in there. Yeah, so this comes with version 1.18.3 and later, right? And tomorrow when VMware announces this, they would actually say it's 1.20.1 is the version. So any SDDC that is running 1.20 version would actually get the storage option in place. And the storage option is cool. As you can see, it would give you the option to attach the data store. That means you also have an API available to actually attach that data store. Right, now, before we go and do that, let me show you, how it works. So we go back into the AWS console. So within AWS, as Keith and Jason mentioned, FSx for ONTAP is an AWS offering. So you can go into the console and search for FSx. I already have it there, so there's no point in searching, but still, just to show you guys that. So out of 4 offerings, ONTAP is one of them, right? And if you see, majority of the customers, since the inception, it's been almost an year now, we have got large number of customers running iSCSI as well as NFS workloads in AWS using this. There have been many scenarios where I have personally involved in making sure customers can move the data from EBS onto iSCSI disks that is running on FSx ONTAP because of the efficiency capabilities that we offer, right? So as you can see, I've got the FSx page here. it's very simple. You have to go and create a file system. I'm not going to create a file system now. It takes 30 minutes. When I say creating a file system, it's nothing but creating the storage itself. So that means it goes and deploys ONTAP on 2 EC2 instances. And I will not go much technical details in there because AWS generally doesn't want us to talk through how exactly it's actually built behind the scenes. However, it's 2 EC2 instances running. It has got ONTAP software installed. And it'll actually go into 2 zones in there. And you'll have a floating IP address, which will be used for as an endpoint to connect. Now, once you create the file system, I'll quickly show you that. It's very simple. You go in here and then say FSx ONTAP, and you have got a quick create and a standard create as well. Here, you would specify what is the throughput required. And again, as I said, we have both multi-AZ and single AZ. However, for GA, we are only supporting multi-AZ. You can specify the capacity here. It can go up to 192 terabyte. But then, from an on-premises standpoint, generally customers try to keep smaller data stores. So you can either have multiple file systems created for each of the data store, or you can have a single file system and then actually create multiple volumes in there. You can specify the throughput, the IOPS. And IOPS, you can go up to 80,000. That's what maximum an EBS volume would actually give you. However, with FSx ONTAP, you have got flash cache capability in place, similar to what we have in on-premises, because it uses NVMe cache disk. So you would actually get more throughput, more read IOPS with better latency because the reads are not going back to the disk. Instead, they're actually getting it fetched from the cache itself, right? So instead of 80,000, customers would generally see 120, 160, depending upon the block size, which they have in place. To give an example, I've been doing some testing with SQL and Oracle. We saw even 220,000 IOPS at 8K block size with FSx ONTAP. So once yes.
So question. So the APIs, if I want to run my shop as infrastructure as code, am I going to be able to have all of these options as in the APIs?
Yes.
Okay.
So the question is, do you have Terraform support? Do you have any other API support? Yes, you have Terraform support. You have REST API support for it. The ONTAP CLI is also available.
Okay. Thank you.
So once you specify that, you can specify the throughput. It's a bug on the AWS side. Ideally, the throughput capacity comes up there with a drop-down. You get 2 gigabytes. It starts with 128 megabytes per second up to 2 gigabytes per second throughput, right? And our recommendation is to use anything from 512 up to 2 gigabytes for your data store, volumes. Once you create the file system, as you can see, it's very simple. It's the regular AWS concepts. Once you create the file system, you would actually get the file system here, as you can see. So I'll show you the one that is created. So this is an 8 terabyte file system. And you can see I've created 8 terabyte for the capacity, 2 gigabytes throughput, 40,000 IOPS. And it's actually in 2 availability zones, 2A and 2B. And it's part of one of the VPCs. And I have got an endpoint address, which is actually outside of the generic private IP address ranges, just to make sure there is no IP overlapping happening. And that's up to the IT team to decide what they need. Once this is done, you need to go and create a volume. Again, for the purpose of this demo, I created one volume. As you can see here, tech field DS stands for data store 01. So I have the volume in place here. It has got a junction path. Again, for those people who understand FSx ONTAP, we have a tiering capability in place, which means any data that is inactive will be automatically pushed into S3. However, for the data store support, we recommend only to enable snapshot for tiering, not the active data. The reason for that is because when you tier the data, the virtual machine data, it goes into S3, so there might be delays in actually recovering it. So again, this is a solution that we have been building, so we are testing that to see if it would be better because the data is right now sitting within the data center of AWS, and S3 is also in the same data center, but we are actually testing that to make sure it would work. It won't actually cause any issues for the virtual machines. But otherwise, if someone asks you, you guys were in the field day, should tiering be enabled? Tiering can be enabled for snapshots only, right?
So this is ONTAP. How do I move it from this AWS delivered service, me, the vSphere stuff, to some other vSphere deployment?
So let me rephrase the question. So if you want to move from AWS VMC vSphere to Azure
to whatever. To
Or
some other
on-premises.
vSphere, yeah.
Okay. So I'll answer the question in two ways. One, if customer started with VMC SDDC and he has got FSx ONTAP, he can always snap mirror the data if he's using ONTAP in on-premises, reverse snap mirror the data to on-premises, and actually bring the data back. Because snap mirror, as you know, it's block level replication. It works fine. Now, if they want to go to, again, on-premises, but they're using third-party storage, they can use HCX, which is VMware HCX capability, hybrid cloud extension for migrating the VMs off, which will give you either a cold vMotion capability or a live vMotion as well. Again, live vMotion is serial, so you can only do one at a time, or you have to do bulk vMotion, which is actually bulk. You can do multiple VMs at the same time, but there would be a downtime when you're actually cutting over from cloud to on-premises. So that's one. Or you can use third-party, again, Veeam or any other existing solutions can be used to actually go back. Same works with Azure AVS or to Google GCVE as well, because you don't have snap mirror support between FSx ONTAP to any other cloud, because FSx is proprietary to AWS, right? So in that cases, you use HCX, because that's what we are documenting too. HCX is the ideal solution to actually have the data movement between the clouds. Although we'll have other services that we will actually build, because it's the beginning, as Jason mentioned. We'll have more solutions and services coming out. Yeah. So we have the volume here. If you want to mount, all you need to do is go into the storage virtual machine, very generic approach, take the NFS endpoint, and that's the one that has the floating IP. Take that, go back into VMware Cloud Console, come in here, and say attach data store. So it'll actually tell me, how many clusters are there. I already have 3 of them attached. I'll say, I want a new one. Just make sure the connectivity is in place. It'll actually validate. Once it validates, basically it's making sure that it's able to communicate back to the VPC that is actually in AWS. Once it is done, so here there might be some challenges for customers who are not AWS ready or haven't got much AWS experience. They need to make sure they have their network security groups on the VPC side enabled so as to actually accept the traffic on both the sides. Once this is done, as you can see, it's validated. That's our junction path, tech field day. You'll see FSXN is in place. Just say the name. So I'll say TFD DS01. Boom, done. It will actually go and attach the data store. So we'll go and actually look at here. So this is the vCenter, for VMC SDDC. So we'll try to get some logs in there. So let's go into monitor. Come on. The internet isn't as fast as I expect it to be. Come. So, it takes generally up to a minute or two to actually, get that mounted. Come on. Yeah, you can see the one that we mounted. Tech field day DS01, the IP address. So hardly took less than a minute to mount a data store, and it can go up to 100 terabyte in size. And you can actually shrink it. We can do that if you want to. So we have it mounted now. So we go back into the volume. And then say resize. Again, all of this is available via APIs. You can say update the volume, give a different size. Oops. Yeah, when I created the volume, I didn't specify that. But again, this is the value. You need to enable efficiency for your data stores, because when you keep your VM data, as you know, most of that can be compressed by up to 80%. So you should definitely enable it. When I created the volume, I might have missed it, but this is captured in the best practices. Once you say update, it would actually update the volume. You can go back in and then refresh it right from here. Once it completes, then you can actually refresh it. You can, on the fly, change it. So now compare this with adding a host versus just with a click of a button or with an API. You can actually change the data store size and get it used for any application that you have.
So if you actually change the storage efficiency on the fly, will it go back through and take advantage of efficiencies on already existing data?
Not with inline efficiency. So the question is, if we enable efficiency later, will it work?
They can hear me and see me.
Yeah. Okay. So in that case, yes, not for the inline deduplication, but for anything that is existing there, yes, it'll actually go through the process. For anything after that, for the new data, that the blocks that is coming in, it'll actually apply the inline deduplication as well, yes.
Okay, cool.
So what about typical data center hygiene once there's data created on these volumes? How is, since you're releasing this GA tomorrow, do you have backup companies on board? Do you have a way to take care of all that?
They're reducing a GA today.
Oh, today, sorry. I'm so confused.
To the backup companies, it's just another data store to back up from, probably. You access it to the same APIs in vSphere that you would for the vSAN data
I'm just
store.
making sure.
Yeah. So we are working on solutions. So as you said, yes, any of the existing vendors who works on the NFS side, it will work. However, there will be limitations. Keep in mind, in VMC, you don't have the entire credentials. You don't have the vSphere local credentials in place. You don't have the administrator credentials. You have cloud admin, which has restricted permissions. So it cannot mount a data store, because you can mount the data store for FSX through the console, but they cannot do that directly. Those permissions are actually, kind of cut off. But yes, apart from that, it would actually work.
Okay.
Now,
So if it works in VMC today, generally speaking, if your backup solution works in VMC today, this shouldn't be any different?
No. So if the question is, we have NetApp Snap Center that works in on-premises, for NFS data stores. That doesn't work with VMC. Again, the simple reason, because Snap Center uses local vCenter plugin, and we are moving into remote plugin, by the end of the year.
So if I'm using a supported VMC backup, I'm saying this is.
It should work.
Yeah.
It will work, rather. Yeah. And we are working on actually validating those vendors as well, because it's just hitting the floors now. So we are making sure, the ones that has lesser limitations, we are bringing them on to, the customers faster.
Because that brings up another question, because the reason the backups won't work, right, is because you have less access. You don't have access to the hardware. That's the whole reason for using a public cloud. So everything VM and down, you don't have access to.
Yep.
So are there any other things that a storage administrator would be used to doing that now they don't have to do or don't have access to do because they don't have access to the infrastructure? So what kind of things are those?
One of the things that I can actually highlight is VAAI. That's something that every administrator wants to have. With NFS, you can actually quickly clone the VM because it's offloaded back. It's not a host-based replication. That's not available with FSx ONTAP.
Okay, I was actually going to ask, do you actually have vice fuzzy development underway? Because things like VAAI, there's lots of other file services that are available in VMFS that are not available on an NFS data store.
Yeah, so we are working towards that. We have a good roadmap in place. There are many things that is coming up, which we really cannot talk here. But yes, many exciting stuff that is actually coming out, which will actually enable the same functionalities what we have in on-premises. I wouldn't say all of them will come, apples to apples, but eventually it'll all end up there. Because our primary objective, and not just ours, VMware's, was also to make sure customers can adopt VMC for storage-intensive workloads. And as you can see, 99% of the customers have storage-intensive workloads in place because they start small, they end up with huge amount of data. So that's the first use case that we are trying to solve. Then we are getting into the disaster recovery side, and then all the feature sets. I'm tempted to say more because I'm an engineering guy. I have too many things in my list, but I really cannot because I've got my guys watching me.
There was a reason I asked you.
One thing I can say, we have a similar offering in Azure. I know it's VMware's, the AWS side of it, but we have a similar offering in Azure called as Azure NetApp Files with Azure VMware solution. There we support Snap Center backup for virtual machines.
And I know that's not the focus of today's conversation, but is that GA or is it?
No, it's in public preview. So Azure NetApp Files as a data store for Azure VMware solutions is public preview now. But the rest, everything, no VAI, everything remains the same. It's just that Azure was lenient with us to say, come in and actually, do this. And we're like, okay, we're jumping on it, we got it running. So I have the demos for that. I'll be publishing those.
And you have the requirement for the SDDC group, so the Transit Connect VTGW.
Correct.
How is that going to affect customers from a pricing perspective, right? Is there going to be any pricing break as this is offered, right? That's a lot of throughput. Okay, fantastic.
Thanks for asking. You know, I was transitioning to that anyways. So, cool. I'll talk about it. So the question is very valid because the transfers goes over Transit Gateway. Because Transit Connect is nothing but an AWS Transit Gateway behind the scenes. Thanks to VMware, they have automated that. So all customers have to do in this process is to create a Transit Gateway attachment, attach it. You know, that is it. Problem solved. From a data transfer standpoint, yes, there would be cost, as you know, because Transit Gateway charges the customer based on the number of attachments in place and the amount of data that is actually being transferred. So it purely depends on how much is the customer using, you know, whether it's actually highly transactional or not. Again, on a day-to-day basis, if you look at it, the change rate is generally 1 to 2% in an environment. But in the sizer that you see, and I'll talk about this in detail, we use 10% as the change rate just for writes. Reads, we consider 25%.
Okay.
So we're kind of putting up to 35%. Even with that, I would say, you know, it would only cost the customer the price of adding 2 hosts into the SDDC. You know, may not beyond that. Again, I wouldn't say that's a final. This is an assumption that we make. Now, there might be customers who have got Oracle or SQL databases that are very transactional. They're continuously reading the data, writing the data. In that case, the numbers would actually go up.
Sure.
Again, Transit Gateway, you know, is something that would actually, you know, eventually change.
Okay.
You know, where you'll have different connecting mechanisms. Transit Gateway will still remain, but to the question that was asked specifically, you know, hey, how do we get it? We have the plans to actually, you know, change that.
Okay. And so I think you said earlier that it will go through the T0 of the
Yes.
NSX, but not the T1s.
No.
So are you recommending, or is there something in the works to go to a multi-edge SDDC so that we're separating out? Because traditionally, you're going to get one T0
Correct.
in a traditional cluster. So,
Yeah. So
do you recommend segmenting that off?
with T0, you know, VMware is not much concerned from that aspect. However, we have plans to move to T1 at one point.
Okay.
There, yes, there are some discussions going on, I would say. Let me quickly show you the Tco Estimator that we have built. So this is what VMware is going to point to tomorrow, because this is something that I've built. How it works is it uses the VMC sizer that is available out there, the vmc.vmware.com sizer, and it also uses the AWS pricing list. So it's simple API calculations based on the input that is being given to say, hey, what are the numbers? How much can you save? And I'll show you the magic now. Let's assume, you have a customer who has got 400 virtual machines, 4 vCPUs. Leave the storage policy. You cannot edit it anyways, because in VMC, anything beyond 3 is always getting RAID 5 or RAID 6 with erasure coding. You have got storage. Let's say you've got 1,000. And this 1,000 is nothing but aggregated capacity across all of the virtual machines. It's not just one VM. But assume you might have 50 VMs who is actually really storage heavy. But then that would actually be good enough to actually cover the entire 400 to say, this is the amount of capacity you need.
I'm sorry, what is the unit there?
Which one? This one?
Yeah.
Gig.
Okay.
Good point. Thank you. I'm going to highlight that there. Yeah. Okay. So if you've seen the VMC sizer, it's exactly the same, because all I'm doing is an API call. So I kept the UI similar. If the customer has got RV tools output, as you know, you can just get that Excel file. You can do that. But for the purpose of this discussion, I'm keeping it at manual sizing. But that's a really good point. Yeah. Oh my God. How did I miss that? So as you can see, it's multi-AZ. Again, single AZ is the future, but you cannot select it. And you have got profiles. So the assumption here is so if the customer has 100 terabyte extra, which is outside of vSAN, out of that, 20% is for databases. And this is something customer can change, right? So if he changes it here and say, I want 50, it'll automatically change. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So to kind of say, let's say 30%. So if you see the profile, it says, this is FSx ONTAP sizing. It says, how much of data is sitting on the SSD capacity, right? How much of that is performance tier? How much of that is actually capacity tier? Capacity tier is nothing but which is tier to S3. So I'm saying in database case, you don't tier anything. Everything should sit right on the disk itself. So it's 100% is sitting there. What is the savings capacity you get? Is it 35%, 10%? You can change that. how much IOPS you need, what is the throughput. That is it. And then you can specify your transit gateway attachment. By default, it's 2. Now here, the data processing, let's say, I've got 400. So this 400 terabyte means, in essence, it's 800 terabyte because I've got 2 attachments. So you can think the amount of data now is 800 terabyte. Let's say submit. Simple calculator. Right now, I'm making an API call to VMC coming back. You can see you get a whooping 52% savings. If you go with VMC Sizer, it would say you need 54 hosts to actually meet that capacity requirement. That doesn't take off with any customers because of the TCO. That's where FSx for ONTAP really comes in. With FSx ONTAP added, you get 52% savings. You optimize your savings by another 52%. Now, what Mark is going to talk about, if customer wants to just take one of his existing data centers, which is disaster recovery only, and put everything onto AWS SDDC, then with a pilot-like cluster, no, it's not pilot-like cluster, it is without anything, because you can spin up an SDDC within 2 hours. You have all your NFS data stores copied using SnapMirror or using any other mechanism. Now you get an 81% savings.
And what tooling would you use for the DR use case in this scenario? Would it be VMware Site Recovery or VCDR or
good question?
The other, or neither?
VSR and VCDR is not supported with FSx ONTAP.
Okay, so looking at our own role.
Yeah.
So would it be more akin to like deregistering VMs and then re-registering to a different vCenter?
Yes. So we are working on a solution. AJ, can we mention that? Okay. So
you already did.
He got the thumbs up.
So we are working on an orchestration solution that will help customers and you guys to actually perform disaster recovery using SnapMirror from on-premises. Similarly, you can use HCX for disaster recovery or any other existing tool which uses VADP snapshot mechanism. Right? It's just that VSR is not supported now. We are working with the team to get it supported. Okay. VCDR, as you know, because it's alike solutions.
Since we're talking about availability, I also wanted to ask if, since you have a multi-AZ architecture, are you also able to support VMC stretched clusters?
At the moment, no. Okay. But it's in the roadmap. We are actually talking through that. We do not support stretched cluster at the moment.
Okay.
It's not VMware doesn't support it. So. And anything I'm talking is actually on behalf of VMware and AWS, for that matter.
So going back real quickly to something Keith was mentioning about moving data, this is still an FSx, like the same FSx with NetApp ONTAP solution, right? So it's still that same connection that they can do from multiple different endpoints, right?
Yes.
So this is just adding a new endpoint to increase their capability.
Correct. And thanks for bringing up that question. So it's just not as a data store. Now, if you look at on-premises, you have customers who run data on guest-attached storage. And it's a big use case, right? Whoever has been using third-party backup solutions like Veeam or so on, who didn't want to go with SRM, they would actually use guest-connected storage. And FSx is a perfect use case because FSx can connect as any protocol, not just as NFS. It can be iSCSI, it can be SMB. And even multi-protocol for that matter, which will enable guest virtual machines to leverage that capability. That means, now, for some reason, if you have got transit gateway and you have got highly performing virtual machines, like highly transactional ones, what I've seen out of my experience is most of them are guest connected. The easiest way is to actually switch to guest connected storage, in which case it's actually going over the connected ENI, not on this one. So that way you can actually slice and dice it. And this is also covered in the documentation. So there will be a document published, most probably by end of this week on the tech zone from VMware side, which is co-authored by me and one of the VMware guys, that covers all of these aspects in place.
So my name is Mark Vaughn. If you guys haven't met me before, I'm with Presidio. So we were very excited as we started looking at this solution. I've been working with VMware Cloud. I guess it was VMworld 2016 when it was announced. And about a month later, I joined an advisory board with 1 or 2 other partners where we spent the next year kind of giving feedback, what we thought customers would like to see, beta 1, beta 2, and then early access. So we've been working with this for quite a while, and we've always had challenges around storage. I mean, a lot of what we do today is still on the i3 nodes that it launched with. We used very sparingly the R5 nodes that came out a while back to do EBS storage. We use i3ENs more now. To be honest, I'm surprised we don't use i3ENs more than we do. In the cases we've used them have been around database workloads, and it was for the CPU and performance gain that we got out of the i3ENs. For storage, it often still comes less expensive to do multiple i3s. And that's where our challenge has been. And so the TCO that you just saw NiMo talking about was very interesting to us when we started looking at that, because we've really wanted to find a way that we can improve storage without hurting performance, which is why the R5 nodes didn't get used very much. The performance wasn't there. In particular, and NiMo also touched on this use case. So when you look at FSxN in the cloud, what we're looking at is we had a customer come to us who wanted to do disaster recovery. They're a NetApp customer today, so they have NetApp storage on-prem. We came to them jointly with NetApp to kind of give them a preview of this technology because it fit into many of the boxes they were trying to check with disaster recovery. And they're going to be running a snap mirror directly into this volume. And as NiMo just showed, the ability to then attach that volume into VMware Cloud. And so their goal, and what we're going to help them automate, is exactly what you just brought up a minute ago of, should everything go away there, we're going to script running through the inventory, finding all of the VMs, importing them into vCenter, and powering them on. Yes, we're very anxious to see an orchestration tool that will do this for us. But at the same time, these aren't difficult things to script either. And as a matter of fact, there's some things that we do with some of our other customers, even around VSR and VCDR, where we still do a little bit of scripting around the environments because customers don't want to run a pilot light. And is everyone familiar with the term pilot light? So in particular with this customer, this is that same example, but this is what the end goal would be. Right now, we're building the environment with them, getting everything running, and then the second step is going to be script it all so that we can actually delete the SDDC and then have it all rebuild on demand. So that's what this would look like for them, is they would have everything mirrored on-prem. Should the environment on-prem go away, scripting would then create the SDDC, mount the storage, loop through, powering up all of those VMs. Now we're in the process of actually deploying this right now. I really like what we've been able to do with some of the DR solutions in the cloud. I still think it's one of the best examples of a good place to use VMC. For a lot of our customers, they see that as kind of their first stepping stone. If they're not ready for something else, I'm still shocked at how many customers are afraid of putting workloads into the cloud. This becomes that easy button for them. I also look at it, I know that a lot of you guys were here in the early P2V days. I always told people that P2V, there was not a tool for that, there was a toolbox, because no one thing would fit every solution. We find that the same way with a lot of disaster recovery solutions and business continuity solutions we try to build out. You know, we have customers came to us initially wanting to use SRM or VSR until they actually tried putting a couple hundred workloads on it. And they're like, oh, wait a minute, is there a more economical way that we can do this? VCDR was a good solution. That came in. But it still didn't quite check all of the boxes, especially for our NetApp customers. So I see this as a very valuable tool that's going to be in the toolbox going forward as we start looking at business continuity solutions for our customers. The ability to attach this not only for growth, so I think that our production workloads are going to benefit from this greatly, but also for disaster recovery and the ability to leverage SnapMirror. The fact that that is supported is big for us. So we're very anxious for it to be supported in some other platforms as well.
What are y'all using? What script are you using? So you're using this tool to get it over there, but how are you going through the process right now? What are you using for the scripting?
We've scripted these in different pieces for other projects, but in different ways. So we're actually going to be combining a couple different scripts. I think we're going to try to focus more in CloudFormation where we can. But there is also some Power CLI and some other things that we're having to leverage in there. And
so are you controlling it with any one thing like a Terraform or anything like that?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
The scripting portion is still in development. So as our phase one is build all of this, make this work,
it happen.
and then figure out how can we shut it all off and then rebuild it quickly.
Okay.
So paint for me the higher level vision. That's very, very, very detailed on that low level work that needs to be done to kind of make it work. What's the architecture picture from a cloud architect's view when he's doing this, or he or she is doing this across multiple customers, environments, et cetera, where it's not just, because this can be very customer specific or very group of customer specific. How do I create a standard practice across different underlays?
I would like to make as much of this reusable as possible. Also in the back of my mind, I know that there's some orchestration tools coming up behind us that may pass us before or may cross the finish line about the same time we do, in which case we'll probably retool over to those just to be more supportable, more repeatable. I do know that this is definitely going to be leveraging, if you're familiar with the VM, there's the Fling for copying VMC environments. We'll definitely be leveraging that before we power anything down. Snapshot everything with that, make a copy of everything with that, script re-importing that. As far as making this, are you talking more like multi-tenant?
No, I think you're getting to my point, which is portability. It's cloud. Today I'm using FSXN. Tomorrow I could be using some other NetApp solution or some other vendor solution. I don't want to throw away the high-level architecture, the low-level bits. When me and Alistair get together, I'll draw something, and Alistair does it, and then I never change my drawing when he changes how he does it.
It would be nice to make that modular so that if this solution were to tweak or if it were to add functionality where we could just simply adjust a module or even replace a module with something that would attach in a different way. As they also mentioned, there may be some different attachment methodologies coming in the future. Yes, anything we script I would like to see.
Yeah, I hear this stuff is hard. It's hard. This is what we're doing is hard, and we're still very early. So there's no complaints, it's just hard.
With any automation, there's usually the very first script that is very long and very serial. Everything just goes through one at a time. And then there's the cleanup and the process of trying to make it more modular.
Do you envision having capabilities like being able to test failovers and do dry runs of failovers and commit dry runs of failovers and like things like automated fail back at some point? These types of more advanced DR features?
Yes. So the failback we would need to work through. I know that that's a simple answer to a complex question.
I liked it though.
I'm just going to leave it at yes. Ask NiMo for anything else. No. Our goal would be yes, to be able to. There's no reason why anything we script for an initial failover could not just be run and cleaned up over and over. So that would be, as far as the testing goes, yes, you should be able to run this, and I would recommend anyone run this at least 2 or 3 times a year. My goal would be also that when it comes to the script that you could break up workloads into groups so that you don't have to fail over everything, but you could tell it fail all, fail group 1, fail group 2. Because I know that a lot of times when it comes to testing, you want your testing to be more granular, and they don't often test everything every time. So yes, we would like for the automation part to be something that we can break up into smaller groups, and then leverage, for fail back, it would be leveraging SnapMirror again.
Okay.
To push the workloads back.
Are you concerned that you kind of get into the field where all these software companies like the Veeam, PCDs, are already existing, you can't replicate what they can offer? For example, Veeam, sure backup, right, to verify my backup actually works. So where do you see this moving in the future? Do you try to compete directly with them?
No, like any orchestration tool that may come out from NetApp as well, I mean, we would constantly evaluate, is it worth continuing to do custom scripting, or is there an orchestration tool? Right now, scripting would not be my first choice,
Right.
but there's a customer need now, and there's tools in the future. So scripting is that automation is the way that we're going to deliver this today.
Yeah, if you need this, you have to do this today. In a 2 years from now, it integrated into Zerto, let Zerto do it. But if you need this today, there's not many options.
And these functions and the calls that we're going to be doing for this aren't heavy lifts. It's just going to kind of be the first time that we're taking 2 or 3 different pieces that we've done in other migrations, putting those together in a way that's going to work directly with FSx ONTAP.
Okay, so you're taking what you learn with customers and making it available to us, to other customers.
Correct.
Then do you offer this, or is your plan to offer this as a ongoing managed service, or is this a product you're delivering to customers as kind of a one-time thing?
Initially, it would be delivered as a one-time thing for this particular customer. We would then evaluate, is this something we would want to do more of? And if that particular customer also were to come back and say, hey, great, we love this, but can you maintain all of this? I mean, we definitely have an offering around that we could put together. This is my last slide. I just kind of wanted to talk about what got us excited when we first saw this and what we're looking at doing. You know, I'm not even touching on the many environments that we're migrating today where all the cost savings that NiMo talked about, you know, that is also something that we're very interested in going back and looking at. Can we reduce our node counts, which is going to simplify, you know, the environment itself, less to manage. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to take away from how like impossible this was a little bit ago. There was the mindset that you're able to do it, but I've done way more DR than I'd like to admit, and the automation and the test is and failing over, and as Andy mentioned, failing back is so difficult when you put in dependencies, et cetera, and you stretch it across customers. So the base capability of getting the storage over there to AWS and attaching it to VMC on AWS, the easy part. This is the hard part.
Well, and I mean, part of the reason I ask those questions is to actually be a product that would be usable for a lot of places. You need to do all those capabilities versus somebody who says, well, your product doesn't do the things I really need it to, so I'm just going to go home and grow my own approach. So, I mean, these are all things that if you start thinking about disaster recovery, you really have to pay attention to. And if a product doesn't supply all the capabilities that you need, it's like, well, let's just hire a couple developers and do it ourselves.
And I've gone down that route, and I'd rather just have somebody else figure it out across multiple customers because we've seen more than I have. This is.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. And it's just, you know, the completeness of the solution is a big part of whether you'll actually get that done.
All right. And we definitely are looking to be able to replicate this with other customers. I would not say that we're definitely looking to productize this because, again, I think there are some orchestration tools from the vendors involved here with VMware, with NetApp, that are going to be coming along that we'll be able to pivot to. I would love to see a day where this would work with VMware Site Recovery and give you one more option of having to build.
Love to see a day when VMware Site Recovery works.
I can say it's working. We actually do multi-tier with that and other tools because, again, it kind of started pricing itself out as the environment grew.
Yeah, I did a podcast just a couple of days ago about how so much emphasis is on developers and being able to write code, and people don't realize that with ops, there's a lot of stuff you have to write scripting and tooling and coding for too. So I think that's awesome still.
There is. We've done that with HCX. We've done some large migrations when it gets to be over 1,000. Luckily, there's APIs for HCX, so we could script building the groups, reading the groups, creating the syncs, moving things over. Fortunately, all of the vendors involved here have been very dedicated to making sure that the APIs are available as well.